Hello everyone. So today we're gonna visit um, Gloria Anzaldua's work, and we're gonna talk about borders and mestizaje and review her work. First of all, what's a little bit of her biographic information? Gloria Anzaldua was born in 1942 in Rio Grande Valley in Texas. And she's the oldest of a family of four children. Um, she grew up in a family of farm workers, and she moved from ranch to ranch following the migrant workers, the migrant farmers path, you know, as her family would move to the different job sites. Um, Anzaldúa gained all of her knowledge about the southern Texas and Chicano discrimination from personal experience, while working on the farm and ranches to help with expenses, and by the way she was educated also. By age 11, her family moved to Hargill, Texas, which is in the border of Mexico and the US, and that became her fixed home place. And this is where she be, had finally access to a more steady source of education. Um, at age 14, her father was killed in a car accident. Um, and, her family endured different kinds of hardships. She still remained focused on her education. Anzaldúa died in 2004 from complications of diabetes. Um, and another interesting fact about her, which also fits into her own work, is she suffered from an endocrine condition which caused her to menstruate at only 3 months old and stop growing at age 12. Um, and this is why she would say that she was born queer. So some of in the book, um, Borderlands, La Frontera, the new Mestiza, um, Anzaldúa touches upon many different issues. One of them, the first one that I wanted to focus on. So in this presentation, I'm only focusing on certain specific things that are relevant in Anzaldua's theoretical work. The serpent's voice is, and I'm going to read a quote from her. Until I am free to write bilingually and to switch codes without having always to translate, while I still have to speak English or Spanish when I would rather speak Spanglish, and as long as I have to accommodate the English speakers rather than having them accommodate me, my tongue will be illegitimate. I will no longer be made to feel ashamed of existing. I will have my voice, Indian, Spanish, white. I will have my serpent's tongue, my woman's voice, my sexual voice, my poet's voice. I will overcome the tradition of silence. And there's many things that we can think about in this from this little extract of Anzaldúa. So she says, until I am free to write bilingually and to switch codes without having always to translate, while I still have to speak English or Spanish. So she's referring here to, being part of this world in which she speaks Spanish, she speaks English, and she is in when she's in school, she's almost or forced to speak English. Um, but herself, she speaks Spanglish, and then that's where she's comfortable. That's her language. but both worlds um, push her to either be pure Spanish or pure English in her speaking. Um, that's why she says about she doesn't want to feel ashamed of this existence of the. She doesn't want to feel like it's an illegitimate tongue. You know? So this serpent's voice is when she talks about it. What is Anzaldua speaking about? So I'm asking you to think about these things. What is she speaking about when she talks about the serpent's voice? Who is the serpent? And why use the serpent as an image, a metaphor? In the reading, she talks about the um, bifid tongue, no, this tongue that has two sides, no, like in this image. This image is Coatlicue, and for her, Coatlicue is very important. Coatlicue represents her. Coatlicue is the goddess, one of the goddess in the Aztec pantheon, and she comes from Coatl, which is serpent. So this, you can see the serpents here. She has two faces, no, and two tongues. So another of her thoughts is writing is dangerous because we are afraid of what the writing reveals, the fears, the angers, the strengths of a woman under a triple or a quadruple oppression. Yet, in that very act lies our survival because a woman who writes has power, and a woman with power is fear. So, as we can see for Anzaldúa, writing is key in her path towards liberation. You know? So, my questions here for you to think about is what is Anzaldúa trying to say with these thoughts? Which oppressions is she referring to? Which are the triple oppressions or the quadruple oppressions? You know? So I'm not going to give you the answer. I want you to think about it. Another one of her concepts, Nepantla. Well, Nepantla is an Aztec also concept. Comes from the Nahuatl word meaning in between space. No? So she retakes this notion of Nepantla and adapts it to her own writings and to her own philosophy. And Saldua adopts this term and uses it to represent psychic, spiritual, and material points of potential transformation. Nepantla indicates a liminal space where transformation can occur. Liminal, in the limits of. No? Indicates space times of great confusion, anxiety, and a loss of control. But with Nepantla, Anzaldúa underscores and expands the spiritual, psychic, supernatural, and indigenous dimensions. So she uses Nepantla because she wants to understand this liminal space, this space of limits, of where different things come together, you know? So what's coming together? Spiritual, is there spiritual realm, the psychic, the supernatural, the indigenous, all the different cultural spaces. You know? Between cultures, the experience of Nepantla. So here we come to ground this understanding of Nepantla more in the cultural sense. Living between cultures results in seeing double. First from the perspective of one culture, then from the perspective of another. So you are in between cultures, right? But you are seeing them at the same time. It's simultaneous, you know? So seeing from two or more perspectives simultaneously renders those cultures transparent, or it renders them unique, no? Because it's a unique point of view that is connecting both, no? You bring this person who is in this in between is the bridge, Removed from that culture center, you glimpse the sea in which you've been immersed, but to which you were oblivious, no longer seeing the world the way you were enculturated to see it. From the in-between place of Nepantla, you see through the fiction of monoculture, the myth of superiority of the white races, and eventually you begin seeing through your ethnic culture's myth of the inferiority of mujeres, as you struggle to form a new identity and the mythologization of race occurs. You begin to see race as an experience of reality from a particular perspective and a specific time and place, history, and not as a fixed feature of personality or identity. So, this is also a quote from Anzaldua, and many things we can think about many things in this quote. So, living between cultures results in seeing double. So there's this duality in the way a person that inhabits Nepantla or inhabits the space in between cultures views the world and connects the world, And not only connects these worlds, it creates them in a different um, form. They acquire a different status once this person that inhabits these in between places looks at them at the same time and is connecting them. And the other point that she emphasizes is once you inhabit this in between space, you can understand how race is not a fixed feature of an identity or of a personality. It's something that moves, that it depends on where you're standing. Meaning it's a movable category. It doesn't determine a person. Now the other notion she talks about is mestiza consciousness, and we see that especially in the borderlands, la frontera, the new mestiza. And what are the key elements on the new mestiza consciousness that Anzaldua proposes? First of all, borderlands nurture the new mestiza consciousness. No? Why? Because it's this inhabiting of these in-between spaces. No? The mestiza consciousness is a survival strategy. And then she says, indigenous like corn. Like corn, the mestiza is a product of crossbreeding designed for preservation under a variety of conditions. Mestiza consciousness is a consciousness of duality. Again, this Nepantla space, embracing ambiguity and contradiction always at the same time. Mestiza consciousness is flexible because rigidity means death. La mestiza is constantly shifting out of habitual formations. It's a constant transformation. Inclusion instead of exclusion. The mestiza operates in a pluralistic mode and is beyond oppositional consciousness. Now, mestizaje, from Anzaldua's perspective, mestizaje is a demystification of social boundaries and territorial borders. Thus conceived, the spaces between cultures and nations are porous and flexible. No. So she acknowledges that internal complexities are what make a mestiza consciousness significant. So the mestiza consciousness is not an easy, already given form of identity or form of consciousness. It's constantly created and recreated. And Saldua does not imagine distinctions in opposition to each other, but acknowledges concurrent identities, shifting strategies, and capacities for change. So now mestizaje. So we've heard of mestizajes in different forums in history. So the generic understanding of mestizaje is interracial, intercultural mixing. No? Now the colonial understanding, which was our first understanding of mestizaje, um, which it's a category brought established by the Spaniards in colonial times, is the understanding of mestizo was the mix of European and indigenous. So it was a fixed identity, even a legal one. Then for once the independence movement began in Latin America, the nationalists' understanding of mestizaje is an affirmation of a distinct cultural identity, distinct from what? From the European. So in Mexico, for example, Jose Vasconcelos talks about la raza cósmica, which for him is the best from the European and indigenous traditions comes this new race, the raza cósmica, no? The mestizo, the mixing of the indigenous, African, and European traditions. This, however, this discourse, this nationalist discourse, has always favored the European connection over the other two roots. And then Anzaldua acknowledges all combinations and the places of contradiction that can result from mestizaje. Um, Always synthesizing, mestizaje is a force of movement, combination, and transformation. Her own thinking about mestizaje fuses with the Nahuatl concept of Nepantla, as I was telling you before. It's as a middle place, a place of passage, thereby adding the potential for agency within the concept. And finally, about Anzaldúa, she was a queer Chicana poet, writer, feminist theorist, and in general, her poems and essays explore the anger and isolation of occupying the margins of culture and collective identity. And she developed theories about the marginal, in between, and mixed cultures that developed along the borders. Um, so I invite you to rethink um, Anzaldúa, revisit her, and think about these questions that I asked in the presentation. Review it again and review those questions and think, what does these uh, ideas by Anzaldúa tell you? Thank you.